This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between Annetta and Charlotte, first-year university students, and Bill, who works for the Student Union Employment Service. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi Bill, this is my friend Charlotte. She's doing first-year science too.
Pleased to meet you, Charlotte. Annetta told me you want some part-time work. Now, I just have to complete your details on the computer. What's your surname?
Johnston.
With an E?
Yes, Johnstone.
I know that you live in the Heathfield Street student residence, but I can't remember the street number there.
It's 126.
126. Good. And the phone number?
Well, actually, I never give people that number because sometimes nobody answers or they forget to pass on the messages. So, I bought a mobile phone yesterday, but I can't remember the number. I think it's 0414 847 748. I'll just check. No, sorry, not 748. It's 749.
0414 847 749?
Yes, that's right. I must try and remember it.
And what sort of work are you looking for?
Well, anything really, I suppose, though it depends when it is. I'd rather work during the day, if that's possible.
How many hours a week were you thinking of?
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe about 10. But I need to keep at least 2 days a week free for study.
Do you have any work experience?
Not much, though I used to help in my uncle's shop when I was at school.
OK, well, I'll put it in, but we don't usually get shop work. What about gardening?
I'd rather not. Everything I touch dies. What other kinds of work are there?
Well, there's a lot of demand for house cleaning, fast food preparation and kitchen work and pizza delivery if you've held a driving licence for 12 months.
I'm not sure. Can I have a look at the vacancies while you talk to Annetta?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
Bill, I'd like to change my job.
You're at the Hamburger Express on the High Street, aren't you? What's the problem?
Well, I never know what hours I'm going to work. I start at 7 p.m. and I'm supposed to finish at 11 p.m, but sometimes they keep me until 2 or 3 a.m.
Yes, that is a bit late if you have to make a 9 a.m. lecture the next day.
And the other thing is the pay. They're supposed to pay me on Thursdays, but they never pay me on the correct day, often not until Friday or Saturday. A few weeks ago, I had to wait until Sunday. They said their son was sick, so they couldn't get to the bank, but they're always making excuses.
Yes, that doesn't sound too good. Would you be interested in pizza delivery? You need to have a driving licence.
Yes, I've got a licence, but I think I'd like to change from working in the evening. Are there any day jobs available?
Well, as I told Charlotte, there are several cleaning and gardening vacancies. And this childcare job that just came in this morning. Do you like children?
Yes, I do actually. What's the job?
Let's have a look. Collect the boy aged 4 from kindergarten at 3 p.m. Pick up the other 2 girls who are aged 6 and 9 from the primary school at 3:15. You take them home and look after them. The parents will be home by 7.
That sounds quite good. What about the pay?
It's the same as you're earning now, 4 hours a day, Monday to Friday, so 20 hours a week. You need to contact Mrs. Alicia Thompson. Her phone number is 91045629 and she lives in Springfield.
I've never been to Springfield. I hope I don't get lost.
Don't worry. It sounds quite straightforward. Let's have a look at the street directory. The Thompsons live here in Tulip Street, number 252. So you catch the 631 bus, get off here next to the post office in Daisy Terrace. Walk past the post office to the corner, and on the opposite corner is the kindergarten. Then walk down Daffodil Place and cross over to the primary school. Then keep going down Daffodil Place to the corner and turn right into Tulip Street.
That is the end of part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 1. Part 2. You will hear a woman talking to a group of college students about volunteering to help other people. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good morning. My name's Lucy Crittenden, and I'm the Director of Operations for an organisation that arranges volunteering in this part of the country. I'm hoping I can persuade 1 or 2 of you to become volunteers yourselves. Let me start by briefly explaining what we mean by volunteering. Volunteers are teenagers and adults who choose to spend some time unpaid helping other people in some way. Most volunteers devote 2 or 3 hours to this every week, while a few do much more. The people they help may have physical or behavioural difficulties, for example. Volunteers can do all sorts of things, depending on their own abilities and interests. If they're supporting a family that's struggling, for example, they may be able to give them tips on cooking, or recommend how to plan their budget, or how to shop sensibly on their income. They might even do some painting or wallpapering, perhaps alongside any members of the family who are able to do it. Or even do some babysitting, so that parents can go out for a while. The benefit from volunteering isn't only for the people being helped. Volunteers also gain from it. They're using their skills to cope with somebody's mental or physical ill health, and volunteering may be a valuable element of their CV when they're applying for jobs. Employers usually look favourably on someone who's given up time to help others. Significantly, most volunteers feel that what they're doing gives them a purpose in their lives. And in my opinion, they're lucky in that respect, as many people don't have that feeling.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Now I'd like to tell you what some of our volunteers have said about what they do, to give you an idea of the range of ways in which they can help people. Habib supports an elderly lady who's beginning to show signs of dementia. Once a week they, along with other elderly people, go to the local community centre where a group of people come in and sing. The songs take the listeners back to their youth, and for a little while they can forget the difficulties that they face now. Our volunteer Consuela is an amazing woman. She has difficulty walking herself, but she doesn't let that stop her. She helps a couple of people with similar difficulties who had almost stopped walking altogether. By using herself as an example, Consuela encourages them to walk more and more. Min visits a young man who lives alone and can't leave his home on his own, so he hardly ever saw anyone. But together they go out to the cinema or to see friends the young man hadn't been able to visit for a long time. Tanya visits an elderly woman once a week. When the woman found out that Tanya is a professional dressmaker, she got interested. Tanya showed her some soft toys she'd made, and the woman decided to try it herself. And now she really enjoys it and spends hours making toys. They're not perhaps up to Tanya's standard yet, but she gains a lot of pleasure from doing it. Alexi is a volunteer with a family that faces a number of difficulties. By calmly talking over possible solutions with family members, he's helping them to realise that they aren't helpless and that they can do something themselves to improve their situation. This has been great for their self-esteem. And the last volunteer I'll mention, though there are plenty more, is Juba. She volunteers with a teenage girl with learning difficulties who wasn't very good at talking to other people. Juba's worked very patiently with her, and now the girl is far better at expressing herself and at understanding other people. OK, I hope that's given you an idea of what volunteering is all about. Now I'd like to talk to you about...
That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2. Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between an admissions officer and a manager from the university's technologies department. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Hello, I'm Randy Agotra from the Technologies Department.
Ah, yes, good. I'm Dave Hadley. Thanks for coming to see me.
That's okay. I believe you want us to do some work for you.
Yes, that's right. I'm responsible for student admissions to the college, and I use a computer system to help process student enrolments and to do the timetabling. But it really doesn't suit the way we work these days. It's over 10 years old, and although it was fine when it was first introduced, it's just not good enough now.
OK, what problems are you experiencing?
Well, 20 years ago, the college was quite small, and we didn't have the numbers of students or tutors that we have now.
So the system can't handle the increasing volumes?
Well, there's a lot more data now, and it sometimes seems the system has crashed, but in fact, it just takes ages to go from one screen to the next.
Right. Is that the only problem?
Well, that's the main one, but there are others. In the past, doing the timetabling was quite simple, but now we have a lot more courses, and what's made it complicated is that many of them have options.
Right, but the system should allow you to include those.
Well, no, it doesn't. It was supposed to. And a few years ago, we did ask someone from the technologies department to fix it, but they never seemed to have the time.
Are there any other issues with the system?
Well, I've been given extra responsibilities, and so I have even less time to do the timetabling. If there was anything you could do, Randir, to make the process more efficient, that would be really helpful.
Well, it sounds like you could do with an assistant, but that's obviously not possible. So what about having an online system that students can use to do their scheduling?
How would that work?
Well, it may mean less choice for students, but we could create a fixed schedule of all the courses and options, and they could then view what was available.
And work it out for themselves. That sounds great.
OK, so we'll need to decide whether or not to improve the existing system or to build a completely new system.
Well, I'd much prefer to have a new system. Quite frankly, I've had enough of the old one.
OK, that'll probably take longer, although it may save you money in the long run. When were you hoping to have this in place?
Well, it's January now, and the new intake of students will be in September. We need to start processing admissions in the next few weeks, really.
Well, it will take more than a few weeks, I'm afraid. As an initial estimate, I think we'll be looking at April or May to improve the existing system, but for a new system, it would take at least 9 months. That would be October at the earliest.
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
What are the next steps if we are to have a new system?
Well, the first question is, do you have support from your senior management?
Yes, I've already discussed it with them, and they're also keen to get this work done.
OK, because I was going to say that's the first thing you need to do, and without that we can't go ahead.
Yes, I've done that.
That's good.
Actually, they mentioned that there's probably a form I need to complete to formally start the project.
Yes, that's the next thing you need to do. I'll send you an email with a link so you can fill it in online. It's called a project request form.
OK, great. And then what happens?
Well, I have a list of things, but I think the third thing you should do is see Samir. He's our analyst who will look at the system and identify what needs to be done.
OK, can you send me his contact details and I'll set up a meeting with him?
OK, that's good. So we should soon be able to get a team together to start the work. Some members of our team work in different locations, so it's not easy to have face-to-face meetings.
That's OK. I'm used to having conference calls, providing they're not late at night.
Right, so I'll send you details of the team, and if you could set up a call, that would be great.
OK, I'll do that.
Thanks.
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture to business students about the use of one particular type of research known as ethnography. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So, what I'm going to talk about to you today is something called ethnography. This is a type of research aimed at exploring the way human cultures work. It was first developed for use in anthropology, and it's also been used in sociology and communication studies. So, what's it got to do with business, you may ask? Well, businesses are finding that ethnography can offer them deeper insight into the possible needs of customers, either present or future, as well as providing valuable information about their attitudes towards existing products. And ethnography can also help companies to design new products or services that customers really want. Let's look at some examples of how ethnographic research works in business. One team of researchers did a project for a company manufacturing kitchen equipment. They watched how cooks used measuring cups to measure out things like sugar and flour. They saw that the cooks had to check and recheck the contents because although the measuring cups had numbers inside them, the cooks couldn't see these easily. So a new design of cup was developed to overcome this problem, and it was a top seller. Another team of ethnographic researchers looked at how cell phones were used in Uganda, in Africa. They found that people who didn't have their own phones could pay to use the phones of local entrepreneurs. Because these customers paid in advance for their calls, they were eager to know how much time they'd spent on the call so far. So the phone company designed phones for use globally with this added feature. Ethnographic research has also been carried out in computer companies. In one company, IT systems administrators were observed for several weeks. It was found that a large amount of their work involved communicating with colleagues in order to solve problems, but that they didn't have a standard way of exchanging information from spreadsheets and so on. So, the team came up with an idea for software that would help them to do this. In another piece of research, a team observed and talked to nurses working in hospitals. This led to the recognition that the nurses needed to access the computer records of their patients no matter where they were. This led to the development of a portable computer tablet that allowed the nurses to check records in locations throughout the hospital. Occasionally, research can be done even in environments where the researchers can't be present. For example, in one project done for an airline, respondents used their smartphones to record information during airline trips, in a study aiming at tracking the emotions of passengers during a flight. So, what makes studies like these different from ordinary research? Let's look at some of the general principles behind ethnographic research in business. First of all, the researcher has to be completely open-minded. He or she hasn't thought up a hypothesis to be tested, as is the case in other types of research. Instead, they wait for the participants in the research to inform them. As far as choosing the participants themselves is concerned, that's not really all that different from ordinary research. The criteria according to which the participants are chosen may be something as simple as the age bracket they fall into, or the researchers may select them according to their income, or they might try to find a set of people who all use a particular product, for example. But it's absolutely crucial to recruit the right people as participants. As well as the criteria I've mentioned, they have to be comfortable talking about themselves and being watched as they go about their activities. Actually, most researchers say that people open up pretty easily, maybe because they're often in their own home or workplace. So, what makes this type of research special is that it's not just a matter of sending a questionnaire to the participants. Instead, the research is usually based on first-hand observation of what they are doing at the time. But that doesn't mean that the researcher never talks to the participants. However, unlike in traditional research, in this case, it's the participant rather than the researchers who decides what direction the interview will follow. This means that there's less likelihood of the researcher imposing his or her own ideas on the participant. But after they've said goodbye to their participants and got back to their office, the researcher's work isn't finished. Most researchers estimate that 70 to 80% of their time is spent not on the collecting of data, but on its analysis, looking at photos, listening to recordings and transcribing them, and so on. The researchers may end up with hundreds of pages of notes. And to determine what's significant, they don't focus on the sensational things or the unusual things. Instead, they try to identify a pattern of some sort in all this data and to discern the meaning behind it. This can result in some compelling insights that can, in turn, feed back to the whole design process.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.